given that the kind of, let's say, identity that this project for 2023 has in terms of, being the first time that the festival is hosted in the African continent, we do want to have a much broader scope, and in that sense, although we don't think we will be able to showcase music from all the 54 countries that you have in the African continent, we hope that at least we get to, to show some of the most interesting initiatives that are happening, both, from West Africa, East Africa, and Central Africa.
Ignacio, but it's so lovely to talk to you. And you are in Egypt at the moment?
Yes, I'm in Egypt at the moment. I was in South Africa living there for a decade, but in 2019 I moved here for family reasons mostly. So my wife got posted here with the Spanish Cooperation Agency. So it was my turn to follow after she followed me to South Africa before. So here we are, but I still work mostly with South African and Southern African music projects.
Okay, but are you? Where are you originally from?
I'm originally from Madrid, Spain.
Okay, oh, I see. Okay,
so in 2010, I got a work opportunity at the Spanish Embassy running the arts program there in South Africa, in Pretoria. So I moved there, just what was initially a 2-year appointment, and then I really liked it there and found my my place, my way, and we ended up staying 10 years.
But that's wonderful. And of course, the weather is also nice, the same as in Spain. So it was probably not in that way a bad adjustment for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that was that was easy. But in terms of, also in terms of the language, it was easy. That was one of the reasons why I chose South Africa. Because here now it's very different. In Egypt, it's mostly an Arab-speaking country, so it's much more difficult to to immerse yourself in the, let's say, local scene, because of the language barrier. So in South Africa, yes, the climate helped, and also the language helped, and it's in general a very very quite welcoming country in terms of being used to receiving a lot of immigration. So it's in that sense that they are very used to that.
Yeah. So what was the projects that you initially did there when you initially went to South Africa?
Yes, as I say, between 2010 and 2012, I was the cultural advisor at the Spanish Embassy in Pretoria. So that involved mostly running cultural cooperation and arts promotion programs between Spain and South Africa. After that, I got contracted by the British Council, which is, as you know, the British Cultural Institutes, and I was mostly working as arts project manager there until more or less 2014. And between 2014 and 2019, until I left, I was working at the SAMRO Foundation. SAMRO is the equivalent you're in Germany, right?
In Austria.
Oh, in Austria. Okay, I don't know the name of the music collection agency in Austria, but in Germany, the big one is BEMA, I think, or GEMA, which is and SAMRO, where I worked, was the equivalent, which is one of the music rights collection agencies. So that's a organization which is the biggest one in the African continent, as South Africa has the more, let's say, developed economy and industry tradition. They have a foundation, which is a small foundation where they operate their corporate social investment programs. They have, like an archive. They give out grants for music studies. They support music organizations, and specifically the program I was working in was live music support, and it was the cooperation project funded by the Norwegian government. What it involved, this live music support, mostly was the three things. One, taking live music to schools to develop young audiences so that kids, develop like a love for concerts. Second, we supported live music venues, which are the spaces where concerts happen. So we had like a network of around 15 venues across the country that got a bit of regular funding from us so that they could host more concerts and in, let's say, better conditions. And the third thing, which was what I was most involved in, was a touring program, tour support program, that we gave out grants for music tours happening in South Africa and in the broader Southern Africa region, the so-called SADC countries, SADC, which is the Southern African Development Community, which it includes like 15 countries, more or less, in Southern Africa, from Namibia, Botswana, South Africa, to the east until Madagascar. So that was what I was doing until 2019. And when I moved out, I ended my contract with Concerts SA, which was the name of this program at the Sambro Foundation. And I started working with New Music SA, which is a very, very similar name, which is, I think you met my colleague Camron Andrews.
Yeah.
We are both, the only two staff members of this small association, which is a non-profit organization. You must have already heard from Cameron, but I would be happy to tell you more.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, basically, New Music SA is an organization that supports creative music practices. When we say creative music practices, it's the less commercial ones, the ones that are more attached to, let's say, composition, experimentation, conceptual approaches, etc. It was founded by one of the most famous South African composers back in 2001, and being a membership association. Most of the members are composers, performers, and people with some professional involvement in the new music space, and basically, it has been operated mostly by pro bono work from the members, from different composers, that normally people that had already a university position, and that could actually devote some extra time for this kind of collective support approaches. And but since 2019, the thing is that the organization basically received an invitation from the International Society for Contemporary Music, the ISCM, to host the annual festival of this organization. This annual festival moves from country to country every year, and it has never been hosted in the African continent. So we were approached by this organization, we are members of it, which is a global society of organizations like us. It has more or less, I think, like 60 members, all across the world. And they wanted, to host this festival in the African continent. So they approached us, they invited us to present a bit, which we did. So all this work, of course, involved a more, let's say, a higher involvement of time, of energy, of resources. So one of the members of the board decided to take on this initiative, and has been provided angel funding, for Cameron and I to kickstart our work. And that has allowed us to mostly fundraise. And now, let's say, the organization has more budget than it had before. And we are more or less looking to forward to a brighter future now in 2022. And with the intention of hosting this festival I was telling you about in 2023. Which will hopefully be the centennial edition of this festival. So it will be the first time in a century that it's hosted in the African continent.
Oh wow! But isn't that so special that it can be done?
It is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We truly believe this. Yes.
Yeah, but you've said now. So basically, what I want to understand is that this organization, you work solely with musicians then in South Africa, composers in South Africa, and you give them a platform.
That's correct. That's correct. Our, let's say, scope is the South Africa, which is already quite a big country. And as you are correct, the kind of platforms that we offer to them are, calls for commissioning of new works, so that they have a budget to produce new compositions, new works, new pieces. Then the organization has been hosting annually a festival, that moved from city to city every year, normally in partnership with a university that has a music department. And this festival normally was a kind of one weekend, or maybe in some cases a week-long festival, where there were, premieres of new works, whether we hosted workshops, concerts, etc. But given that the kind of, let's say, identity that this project for 2023 has, in terms of, being the first time that the festival is hosted in the African continent, we do want to have a much broader scope, and in that sense, although we don't think we will be able to showcase music from all the 54 countries that you have in the African continent, we hope that at least we get to, to show some of the most interesting initiatives that are happening, both, from West Africa, East Africa, and Central Africa. We are still in doubt about North Africa, which is where I'm speaking to you from now. But, the continent is so big that maybe we should, let's say, reduce our scope, geographic scope.
I see. Yeah. But this is wonderful, because I think I've been speaking to musicians in Nigeria as well, and
Fantastic.
I seem to find that there are musicians, classical musicians, and composers, but there's not really for them anything. There's not really a platform, or there's not really any way for them to develop their skills or develop the music, or showcase the music. So this is a wonderful project that you are doing, and to give them this opportunity.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's totally correct. I mean, in that sense, it's not by chance that South Africa is the only country in the continent that has an organization like this, given that it has a longer tradition of it, as we say, I mean, both of economic development, but also in terms of academic institutionalization. So in South Africa, for example, you can find, as I was saying earlier, several universities that have music departments where you can learn mostly composition in the how it has been understood from, let's say, European or global north terms, or from Western, as they also call it, Western tradition, European tradition, global north tradition. However, there are also some universities that offer jazz, and some of them are now starting to, offer, let's say, at least courses in traditional music, indigenous instruments, and so on. But it's true what you say, for example, about the people that you may have spoken with in Nigeria, that in most of the other African countries do not have the same level of development of universities, music schools, and in general of, let's say, for example, orchestras. You find at least 3 permanent orchestras in South Africa. You have a permanent, annual opera season in Cape Town. There used to be one also in Johannesburg. And those kind of platforms, of concert series, programs, institutions and organizations such as orchestras, music schools, etc. It's true that they are developed to a lesser extent throughout the continent. However, as you have found, there are people working on it. There are orchestras all around the continent, from Congo to Nigeria to etc. So that is and also there is like what is interesting is that there are also several music practices that may not be even connected to what we said, a more European tradition, but that are also, let's say, very creative, very experimental, or very forward thinking. So that's the kind of, let's say now, scenario that we have in front of us, which is actually trying to research and map all, what the most interesting, people, composers, performers, and in general, initiatives and platforms that are already working throughout the continent, and try to bring them to South Africa in 2023, and hopefully give them a platform to showcase the work, and also an opportunity for them to get connected and to network with delegates from all over the world. Because this festival, the World Music Days, what it involves is, it's the, let's say, annual meeting of the International Society of Contemporary Music, and of all the different chapters, all those 60 chapters that I mentioned. So every chapter sends at least one delegate, and most of them send at least one composer, and maybe an ensemble or a trio, quartet, etc. So it's let's say the meeting place for contemporary music annually, and we would love, of course, not only to showcase African music, which is normally excluded or present in a minimal way in these kind of events, but also to provide a platform for these African musicians to then, in the following years, to develop their work internationally.
Yeah, because I think also this would be such a great opportunity to connect South African musicians or African musicians with the rest of the world, to see what they have to offer. And I would actually love to see a young composer here in Europe connecting with a young composer in South Africa, and I don't know if they could collaborate into something so that the two types of music also can be brought together, something like that. And I think South Africa has got such a rich culture with all the different cultures that are in the country, that it would be amazing if there could be such a type of collaboration.
Absolutely. I mean, what you've now described, that's that fits totally with the kind of ideas and projects that we are trying to develop as from now, in the lead way to 2023. By the way, you mentioned you are in Austria, and actually the ISCM, our mother organization, was founded in Austria 98 years ago. It will be, as we say, the centennial of the organization and of the festival in 2023. And we are collaborating a lot with and we hope to collaborate more with the Gesellschaft für Neue Musik from Austria. And also, funny enough, the artistic director of the World New Music Days is Lucas Ligeti, who is actually from Austrian nationality. He's a composer, son of Giorgi Ligeti, who, although he was Hungarian, Lucas, his son, was born in Austria. And he's a composer that has developed a career very connected to the African music scene. That's why he was invited to be the artistic director of this event by the ISCM. So we actually do have strong connections and roots with Austria. And actually, I was there a month ago with my boss, with Lucas Ligeti, there in Vienna. But yeah, coming back to the kind of projects that you are mentioning, those are first, as we say, we want to do this kind of mapping research of the continent, that we hope to get support from the British Council actually to do this. And we are working with also our sister organization in the UK, member also of the ISCM. And in terms of creative and cultural exchanges that you are mentioning, most definitely. I mean, we've been sending annually a South African composer to a residency in Sweden. That has been happening for a long time. Also, we annually there is a South African composer at the World New Music Days at the ISCM, but we are very determined to to increase our work in all these, of course, subjected to our failures and successes on fundraising for these kind of projects, which is actually a big mission, very intimidating.
Yeah. Yeah, that I can believe, and it's so wonderful that you have now a bit of financial support to do this work.
Yes, in that sense, in general, that is something that for us it's been, let's say, difficult to try to convey the message about how different it is the scenario where we are operating to host an event of this size, of this ambition in South Africa in particular, and in the African continent, in general, because it's a definitely very different scenario and context compared to what the other previous festivals and the ISCM chapters have found themselves. Actually, it's not a surprise that the festival has never been hosted in Africa, the African continent, and actually on very few times in Latin America, for example, and only in very recent years it has started expanding to Asia, mostly to the more developed economies, like China. But definitely it's been throughout its history, it's been mostly done in Europe, in the US, Canada, and the global North as a whole. So the fundraising challenge that we face ourselves, in South Africa, that although it's, as we said earlier, one of the biggest economies in the African continent, side by side with Nigeria, it's as you may know, it's one of the most unequal country in the world. That means that although it has a lot of rich people, there are big sectors of the population that are still in poverty. So in general, the creative sector finds it quite difficult to motivate for projects which may not directly address these economic inequality, and that focus primarily in a more creative and, let's say, aesthetic approach. So that is definitely one of the main difficulties that we are facing, especially with public funding. The Ministry of Arts and Culture here, or the National Arts Council, are very under-resourced, and we are mostly trying to approach the corporate sector, but of course the corporate sector is normally more interested in initiatives that are, as we say, more commercial or with a bigger audience impact. Our project, we are conscious that it's quite niched, so that is a kind of let's say path that we are trying to walk now.
Yeah, and also that what I've heard also now with the pandemic, when there's so many people without jobs at the moment, so any cultural event is now put aside because it's not the priority. But now, on the other hand, I was talking a lot about this fact that actually it is yet now so important to do these cultural events and to get people going and to get children involved, because you hear in South Africa, many of the singers that I've spoken to, for example, say that they've started in a choir and that this has changed their lives. This has given them opportunities to have a better life because they could then go and study music. Now, if we really go back to that, to find the solution there is to offer this. And you've mentioned previously that you've worked with schools and so on. So what is the situation there? Do you think there's enough being done for culture in schools and for children to have the opportunity to do art?
Well, I would not say so because first of all, well, the in South Africa, music education is not compulsory at schools. So that at any level of primary or secondary. So that already puts a lot of strain in terms of the access that young musicians who want to develop a career and that may need uh, different sources of income could have with being music teachers at schools. That's throughout Europe. It's definitely one of the main activities for young musicians. So that would be a first difficult entry point. It's true what you were saying, that there is a very strong presence of the informal education sector. In that sense, the churches and the choirs of the churches in South Africa have played and still play today a very important role in the access that the kids and the youth can have to music practices and learning music without having that opportunity during the regular school hours. And definitely that choral tradition is at the root of why today you can find South African sopranos and tenors, in some of the most important stages in the US and Europe. The case of Pretty Yende probably is one of the most famous ones. And but that, as we say, it applies mostly to the vocal tradition, to the choral and choirs. However, for instrumentalists and for composers, it's a bit more difficult because they have less of less spaces where they can develop their work. And we must also remember that normally choral works are, excuse me, do not provide the same sense, the same rights of ownership for composers. So yes, there are many composers working on that, but as you know, the arrangements and the capacity also that most of them in South Africa have to license the work or get them published by editors, etc. It's much weaker. But for us, given we, as I say, we are a very small organization. We have been trying to develop different, let's say, strategies or tactics to favor this audience development more broadly, addressing this social inequality that South Africa has. And every year we try to take at least one concert to the townships, which are the previously disadvantaged neighborhoods. And, not currently, but we have had music education programs that are we do not have funding at the moment for them, but that try to promote contemporary music in these spaces. That is something that definitely for us in the near future, that means 2022 and most definitely for 2023 during the festival, we want to address. And actually for the two hosting towns or cities for our festival, it's a double, let's say, host, and it's Johannesburg and Soweto. That Soweto is as you know, the former, the main township of Johannesburg. So in that sense, we, excuse me again, we will, we want to take the music to where the more disadvantaged communities are. So we hope to host at least, let's say, 50-50 of our program in a township in 2020.
Oh, but that's great. That's wonderful that you're going to do that. That's a wonderful idea. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So you have now members that are the composers, and you have this platform where their work can be seen or heard. Is that how it works?
Yes. We've been looking at, and actually that's an ongoing debate for us, how to better service our our members and in general the whole community of new and contemporary music in South Africa. Currently, in 2021, this year, because 2020 was a bit strange due to the pandemic, that we had to, let's say, we temporarily halted our activities until we found what was the best way forward. And how, of course, this year, due to the ongoing social gathering restrictions, we decided to host our festival in a digital hybrid format, not concentrated in just one weekend, but spread throughout the calendar year and in different cities at the same time, because we were not restricted by hosting it in just, let's say, a few days in the same place. So the kind of platforms that we have offered this year, our members have been commissioning 3 new works, that were linked to composers that were having birthday celebrations this year, anniversaries. So it was different composers, 3 of them. These works were premiered at 3 concerts in 2 in Johannesburg and 1 in Cape Town. Those concerts had a small audience in person and were also live streamed. So that was like a kind of combination of the new commissions and the premiere of those new works in these 3 concerts. Then we also commissioned visual works, given that there were these restrictions to just meet physically. So we commissioned 6 composers to develop works that involved, video, so that they could be presented directly on a virtual way, so that it was curated by, we appointed a curator. He selected the composer. Well, it was not only composers, some of them were performers and were like improvisers, etc. So that happened also in June, July, and we got to present these works at the National Arts Festival of South Africa, which is the biggest performing arts festival in the continent. So we were, it gave us a presenting platform. It was not only, let's say, on our website or on our social media. It was actually part of the program of this festival. And we were also very lucky to be selected to present these works with actually an Austrian festival, Ars Electronica.
No, I don't.
Ars Electronica is one of the most important festivals throughout the world in terms of, let's say, experimental and digital arts. It happens in Linz every year since the late 70s, I believe. And they do amazing work. I will send you the links to all these so that you can access them later. So they had this initiative called the Gardens, where they invited dozens of organizations throughout the world to be part of their annual festival in a digital way. So they invited us to present also a selection of our programming this year. So all the works that we presented, let's say, more for South African audiences, we also got the opportunity to be, let's say, echoed there and amplified through the Ars Electronica platform. And lastly, 2 things that we did also was to host a workshop series connected to all the activities that we were doing. So all the composers, all the creators that had been involved in all the activities that I mentioned, they also facilitated conversations, seminars, and master classes. So that was done throughout July and August. And to close let's say, our program for this year, in September, we hosted a concert in Mamelodi, which is the township of Pretoria, where there was a day, the outside, as I was saying earlier, we took to a local shebeen. The shebeens are the local bars. We took to a shebeen, a contemporary music concert, where we combined local musicians with guest musicians, so they jam together, etc.
Wow! That's
amazing. Those are the kind of platforms that we try to provide them. But as you were saying earlier, our aim now is to increase the collaborations with the rest of the continent, one, and also to develop projects with other international regions, especially Europe, of course, but also the US and hopefully Asia, etc. So that is our, let's say, expansion plan for 2022, if we can say it like that.
But you know what? It's so amazing that you went to Shabin and did this concert there, because you think it's only in South Africa that you have all these things, that you can do such interesting things, interesting concerts in spaces like that, and of course also the townships where we can have. I don't know. I think there's so much possibility that you can bring music to the townships and bring music to all the people of South Africa, So we have to talk more about this because I think this is why I also speak to a lot of South African musicians, because I think there's so much in South Africa that maybe the world doesn't know about, and the South African musicians seem to be very sort of eager, and they do their thing, and they're very resilient, and despite that the situation is not so good for them there, and that the money is also not there for them to financially to do all these projects, but yet they do it. They go in gardens, and I've heard they went into parking garages, did a concert in a parking garage and things like that. It's so interesting because it's also then bringing a different sound than when you have in a concert hall, for example, to go in a parking garage.
Absolutely. And let me ask you, Petra, you seem to know quite well South Africa.
Yes, I'm from South Africa.
Okay. Yeah. So but you are based now in Austria, or you just happen to be there now?
Yeah, I've left the country in 2001 already, so I'm not too clued up to what's happening there, but I speak to a lot of musicians now, and this way I find out, what they're doing and so on. So, and I think it's important that we highlight this, because I think there are a lot of talent, and I think I just have this idea that we can so easily cross borders in culturally and also physically, that if from America and from Europe and Africa, musicians collaborate, because, music and art is really such a great way to communicate, and such a great way of bringing people together. If you just look at orchestras, in how many different nationalities you find in one orchestra or in a ballet company, and they create the most beautiful art. And if we can do that now, we have the possibility to do this all virtually. It's still possible to do it,
Absolutely. I mean, I can only agree. And in that sense, I think that music in general plays a very healing role. This kind of, let's say, cultural clashes that may happen on a daily basis. And also because it has such a, let's say, easy way to transcend borders, as you were saying, or even language and aesthetic barriers. So that's that's a true belief that we share, and we hope to be contributing, to this kind of healing process with the projects that we do. And if I may ask you also, where does your interest in talking with us come from? Are you, I don't know, writing a piece on it, or is it just out of interest?
It's a long story, really, because I started a project in April 2020, where I photographed artists in their windows here in Vienna, just to highlight the fact that artists are still at home, and that the lockdown has affected the art. And as the project went on, I just wanted to photograph 50 artists in their windows, just to uplift their spirit and to raise a little awareness. But in the end, I photographed 500, and I photographed 13 ambassadors, actually the Spanish ambassador as well, in the window of the embassy. and also the Bundespräsident. And and then I wanted to write about the experience because I thought I learned so much from doing this, and I learned so much from artists. But then I thought, well, let me find out what's happening all over the world, because that was still in lockdown. Then it was February 2021. Then I started these Zoom calls to artists who were in lockdown, from America to China to Japan, everywhere. And it's part of the moments in lockdown. And these were artists that were all in lockdown, and we spoke about the situation of the arts. What do they think of online concerts? We talk about, I asked the question, what about education? Shouldn't we start with education? Because the education in music and art will create a society where we then have more, appreciation for the arts and artists.
Absolutely.
And then when lockdown finished, it was so interesting, and I just kept on. I just keep on talking because I think these interviews have to be online for people to hear, like what you are saying. People have to hear that, and I believe that if I post these videos, then they will come get to the right people. I just believe that. I believe in energy, so I believe, what you've said now has to end up at the right people, with the right.
Oh wow, that's marvelous of all that you've said, Petra. What a fantastic initiative, and I mean, the energy that you have. I mean, just not only talking numbers, which are impressive, but also the overall spirit, I think, behind your initiative. So, I mean, in that sense, thank you so much for the invitation. What I will do, I mean,
I just want to ask you what is your wish now? What is the wish for you specifically for this project?
Well, our wish, I mean, it may sound too materialistic, but our wish really is to find, let's say, someone, a stakeholder, a funder, a sponsor that gives us a level of stability where we can, let's say, breathe and work towards this 2023 project with a sufficient air and space, because currently it's it's something that is being very stressful for us, having the level of certainty and confidence about the viability of this project. And in that sense, the only thing that is stopping us from reaching that kind of turning point is enough confidence from at least one funder. For now, we are definitely truly grateful to all our sponsors, the Rupert Music Foundation, the Samro Foundation, the Oppenheimer Memorial Trust, the Arts and Culture Trust, and now lately the Department of Arts and Culture is the latest funding confirmation that we received only a couple of weeks ago. But still, the amounts that we are talking are really very significant for our organization on a, let's say, regular annual programming. But to be able to deliver on an initiative with the size and scope of the World New Music Days in 2023, we have to let's say, take a giant leap, and that is that is my wish for 2022, that we managed to accomplish this.
Yeah, but I really wish for you that this I wish that your wish comes true, because I think really you're doing such great work, and to have that platform for South African or for African musicians to just be able to do that. And this festival, I think, would be a great way also to just raise awareness to these wonderful artists that you have in South Africa. So
absolutely, and well, we do hope that that this, as I say, gets fully confirmed and it gets rolling in even at higher speed. And we would love to see you in South Africa.
Ooh,
I mean, at some
would,
point, but
yeah.
if not, definitely around November 2023.
Yeah.
I hope to be able to tell you soon. Please mark it on your calendar, Petra.
Yeah. Oh, I would love to. That would be so wonderful to do that. But listen, Ignacio, this was so lovely to talk to you. And it's the first time I speak to somebody in Egypt. So
fantastic then.
So have a lovely day.
You too.
Okay. And we'll speak soon.
We will be in touch. Thank you so much, Petra. Okay. This was a lovely meeting.
Lovely meeting you too, Ignacio. Bye.
Keep well. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.